now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Let me say good morning or good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night and never, ever goodbye. I've always hated goodbyes from childhood because that's personal trauma. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the great city of, Los Angeles, where we're coming out from under the epidemic, and hope that you are likewise taking care of yourself, and that God has blessed you to survive, and that you're now continuing to thrive. We're praying. We're located at 8916 South Main Street here in the city of Los Angeles, and we're worshiping with the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, which is our sister church, and it's pastored by our good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Holliness, and we have joint services on every Sunday, beginning at 10 a.m. with Sunday school, and then, of course, 11:30, thereabouts, our morning worship will begin, and then again on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. for fervent prayer. And then again on Friday nights, which you can come by tonight if you would like. It's kind of like a free-for-all. We let anyone who comes in the door do what the Lord gives them to do, within reason, of course. Just can't turn the church over to everybody. But they're free to give vent to what the Lord will give them to say in the manner of preaching or ministering to God's people. And it gives a lot of people who are much younger than I and of course newer in the ministry an opportunity to exercise their gift, which is the whole point. Give them a chance to exercise their gift. So you're welcome to come and join in with us. I want to quickly get into our reparations portion. The name of this broadcast, of course, this offering or this presentation is It's Time, and his question is, what is it time for? There's always time for social justice, and to my mind, social justice must always involve environmental and economic justice, because our people and the poor have been harmed throughout our generations here in this country by the environment in which we were forced to labor, environment in which we were forced to live, the environment in which we were forced to try to get our education, meager though it was, the environment in which we were for a long time not permitted to vote, the environment that took away from us, that disenfranchised us, and the environment that is even now trying to disenfranchise us through voter suppression laws, which are the same as the old poll tax and worse type of devices that were employed in earlier generations. And that, of course, environmental degradation always has affected the psychology and the health. All of us need to be in therapy. Treatment for traumas that we have endured and have sustained, whether they be epigenetic, stemming from the horrors, the traumas of the Middle Passage, or the enslavement, the bitter, brutal, cruel chattel slavery that was practiced, employed, utilized here in the United States. We bear the scars. And then, of course, if you have trauma after trauma after trauma, day in and all through the night and all through the next day, and that never stops, then, of course, you can see that why I say that all of us need to be under going therapy to get out from under the heavy trauma. Trauma means injury, for those of you, or wounds, which those of you that don't know that, and the worst kind of wound is not the physical wound, but it is what? The mental wound. All right. Now, the economic component would include reparation for past injustices, past wrongs. The root word of reparations means to repair, to make whole, to restore. And we definitely need to be made whole in this nation. Economically, we need to be made whole as it relates to so many of the various areas in which people endeavor to earn their living, or to seek a place to live, or to get an education, or to get decent health care. And in all of those major areas, health, education, and welfare, the black people in this nation have been injured. The people that are considered black by the people who are considered white, or the people who are considered underprivileged by the people who are considered privileged. In the 15th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, beginning at verse number 12, it says these words. Please hear me. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her go free from thee. And when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let either of them, him or her, go away from thee empty, but thou shalt furnish them liberally out of thy floor, and out of thy flock, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give. Mark the word G-I-V-E, English derivation of the old Hebrew word, but it means the same thing, give. Without charge, without renting, without letting say, well, you can borrow this till you bring it back. No, 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 no. The Bible says, God says, thou shalt give unto them. And in the capitalistic system, nobody wants to give you anything. They don't even give you what you deserve. And drawing from that, you can see right away that the illegal and immoral application of slavery in this country was different and worse and more cruel and more brutal and more criminal and more inhumane than any form of slavery ever employed upon the face of the earth. Case in point, Joseph was a slave, but Joseph was able to keep his name, keep his identity, keep his culture, keep his civilization, keep his language. And in time, God elevated him from being a lowly servant, a slave rather, and being a prisoner in the dungeon, to become the second only in command to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And that was replicated all over the then known world. It was not until the European entered into the slave trade that slavery completely degenerated into the chattel personal property slavery that it became when it hit these shores of the 13 colonies. Afterwards, the loosely United States of now what we call the United States of America. So do not let anybody hide behind the fig leaf. Well, slavery is as old as time, and everybody doesn't do it as engaged in slavery. Not so. Chattel slavery was not practiced anywhere until the European brought it into the New World. All right. I have not much time, but I do want to cover the matter of the fact that this is the 100th anniversary on the 31st of May and the 1st of June. The Black Wall Street Holocaust was begun in a little suburb out from Tulsa called Greenwood, which was started by a black man, O.W. Gurley, in about 1903 or 1906, thereabouts. He came from Arkansas, and he had a little money, so he was able to buy 40 acres. And because of the endemic, systemic, intrinsic, overt racism. He was not allowed to buy in town, but he was able to buy 40 acres out from Tulsa, which he did, and then other escapees or Negroes or colored folks coming out of Mississippi found out that a Negro man had a little town with a boarding house where you could go stay, and so they began to come to Greenwood, Oklahoma, and began to stay in Mr. Gurley's boarding house. And in passage of time, the town began to grow, began to have a theater, began to have a bank, and began to have churches and those type of things that make a town. Stores, their own stores, they traded among themselves. The dollar bounced around in their town about 19 times before it ever went out to Tulsa. And so the city began to thrive. And remind you, from 1900 through 1906 until the riot in 1921 wasn't a very long time. But yet the city thrived. The black population grew. The colored people fellowshipped and congregated one with another, and they had their own institutions. They had their own schools. They had their own churches. Had their own banks. Had their own theaters. Had their own bars. Had their own saloons. Had their own houses and boarding houses, and people were trading with each other. And no doubt some were raising livestock and all of that type of a thing, because that's what you did back in those days. And the people were doing well. It was a wealthy little town. Matter of fact, the colored people in Greenwood were doing better than a lot of the so-called white people were doing in Tulsa, although the white folks said that they were superior. And to make a long story short, because my time is drawing down before I can even get started, there was always a taboo on Negro men going with white women. There's no taboo against white men going with Negro women once the sun went down. And you can look at me and tell some white folks been around. But it was a taboo, punishable by death, lynching, for a Negro, a colored man, as he was known, we were known during those years, to be seen with a white woman, to be close to a white woman. Not saying that those things didn't happen, but when they did happen and they were discovered, the white woman always screamed rape. And it so happened that a young Negro man named Dick Rowland was accused of raping a young white lady named Sarah Page, who was a new arrival there in the city of Tulsa and was operating the elevator that was in then use. It wasn't an automatic elevator. We just go and punch the button. No, the elevator had to be operated by another person. And what had happened was, inadvertently, the black man had bumped against her in the elevator, and she hollered, and the white folks out in the lobby heard her. Black dude got the hell on out of town, because out of the elevator and on out the lobby, because he knew what was about to happen, even though he had gone in there to go use the restroom. But the woman was a woman just like Carol and Bryant falsely accused Emmett Till of attempted rape. So this Sarah accused Mr. Rowland of attempted molestation. So quite naturally, all the white folks wanted now get a rope. They wanted to lynch them a black man. And so Mr. Rowland was subsequently arrested. And when the colored people in Greenwood got word of it, then they got their rifles and shotguns and went up there to make sure, because they had already heard that the white folks wanted to lynch Mr. Rowland. Mind you, this what was said to have happened didn't really happen. He did not try to rape that woman. He did not try to molest that woman. But by the time the truth began to circulate years later, it was too late. And so when the good white man who wanted to lynch Mr. Rowland found out that the good black man had come up to Greenwood to talk to the sheriff and tell him that they better not try to lynch no Negro, no colored man, or else there was going to be trouble. When the white folks heard about that, the good white men in their order and in their high dudgeon said, well, we're going to get some guns, and they wanted to go to the National Guard Armory and get guns. But the sheriff was successful in blocking them from doing that. But then they went and got their own guns, long guns. Somebody came up with a machine gun, which only fired one round at a time, but it was a machine gun nonetheless. And instead of waiting to see if the colored people were going to come back into Tulsa to protect Mr. Rowland, no, they decided we're going to go down yonder to Greenwood, and that's what they did. And on May 31st and on June 1st, they attacked, they assaulted, they invaded, they burned, they murdered, they butchered, they looted, yes, they even raped the people in Greenwood. A lot of the people in Greenwood got out of Dodge, about 40 before all of that started. But a lot of the other people said we got to protect our property, protect our home, protect our families. And as a result, there was quite a bit of a shootout down at the railroad yard that separated Tulsa from Greenwood. And the colored people were successful in holding the white folks off all night. And they mistakenly said when around 2 o'clock in the morning, when all the shooting stopped, said, well, that's the end of that. But you can never play your enemy cheap. That's why I can say you can never celebrate a victory, and no sense in crying too long over a loss, because your enemy is coming back against you. And so it was now about 5,000, mind you, white people with guns and rifles, and the National Guard had joined them, not to protect or to separate between the two combatants, to keep the white folks away from the black folks, keep the black folks away from the white folks. No, the National Guard sided with the white folks. So now they got all of their rifles and their guns, and they're coming in to the city of Greenwood, and all the atrocities that the survivors told before they died, of houses being burned, and people trying to come out of the houses, and as they were coming out of the house, they were shot. People old men, 80-year-old man in a wheelchair, just shot randomly, cold-bloodedly, by the mob, by the people in the mob. Even the police department was going in and making the Negro, one of the Negroes in Greenwood was a sheriff. But the police officer come in his house, told him and his wife to get out, and set that house on fire. And that was because that there was a resentment of the economic prosperity of the city, of the citizens of the city of Greenwood. And so their businesses were torched, their churches were torched, their theaters were burned down, their schools, their banks, their houses, but not before the mob looted all the valuables that they could, and then they set the place on fire. They burned Greenwood to the ground, and they employed airplanes. There were several people had airplanes. Sinclair Petroleum Company, Sinclair Motor Oil, or you call it, they had planes, and those planes were flying around, dropping what they called turpentine balls on top of the houses of the residents of Greenwood, setting those houses on fire, forcing the people to flee. Now the people in Greenwood put up a good fight, but they were not able to overcome all of the people that kept coming. And the final toll of the slaughter ranged from 38 all the way up to as many as 300 people were killed. Black people, colored people, Negroes, men, women, boys and girls, fathers and mothers, preachers, dentists and teachers were butchered and murdered and massacred there in Greenwood, Oklahoma. And the bodies were buried in a mass grave without benefit of a coffin, just buried in a mass grave all together. In Oakland, in portions of Oakland Cemetery, they have discovered the remains of 11 people who were buried in one mass grave. And so, you know, they got all of these modern technological devices now, so they're able to use that sonar to go over the ground. You know, it was the term I'm trying to think of, to survey that ground and find where there are these mass graves might be. They do that by shooting that sonar or that radar down in the ground, and as it bounces off an object, it sends back a signal, and they are employing that now. And that only started last year. And Mrs. Valerie, what's her name? Her name is the blessed Sister Viola Fletcher, 107 years old. She was 7 years old when the riot came through her town and ran her mother, father, and her out of their home. And so she testified last week, or this week rather, before the Congress of the United States. She's 107 years old. The Lord let her live long enough to come and tell the Congress, and y'all say this didn't happen, but we need y'all to give us that restitution, that reparation, that repair to make us whole. But she said, by y'all burning down our school, I never got a chance to finish school. I quit school in the 4th grade. I've had to have menial jobs all my life. See, all of that type of thing doesn't just stop there. It has far-reaching effects in the lives of people. And her brother, what was his name? His name is Mr. Viola Fletcher. What is his name? I wrote it down. Here it is, Mr. Hughes Van Ellis. He's 100 years old. And then the third person was a lady called Mother Randall. She's 106 years old. Full name is Leslie Evelyn Benefield Randall. 106-year-old survivor that was able to tell the people in the Congress that yes, it did happen. Yes, I was there, 6 years old. I remember the terror. I remember the flames. I remember the bodies of my friends and my colleagues, my brothers and my sisters out there laying. So many Negro men dead in the streets, just slaughtered, men and women. And when the National Guard finally got there, instead of restoring law and order or taking the guns away from the white folks who were the mob, the thugs who were the murderers, no, they herded up all the poor colored people and marched them to some internment camp and kept them there for a very long time. A long time is more than a month that they were in there. And that is the story of so many of our black towns. You can multiply that. Wilmington, North Carolina, in 1898, there was a huge slaughter of black folks by the white folk because the black folks were affluent and were doing better economically than the white folks. And the white folks said, we just ain't gonna have it. And they came in there and slaughtered, and they used military weapons. They used the army. They used the National Guard. and that was in Wilmington, North Carolina. Then in Colfax, Louisiana, they killed and slaughtered a bunch of colored people, Negro men there. And when the case went before the Supreme Court threw out their conviction, because it said that the racism displayed had not been was not stipulated in the pleading, and minus that stipulation, the Supreme Court said that the 14th Amendment and the Second Amendment did not apply in a private situation. And that was your Supreme Court of that day, much like your Roberts Court is now. And those were two. We talked about three. We talked about Elaine, Arkansas. No, we talked about Elaine, Arkansas, Colfax, Louisiana, and Greenwood, Oklahoma. But it can be multiplied because the white folks have always rioted against the successful black people. Even now, successful black people are resented by many of their white counterparts. That's why you got all of this incidents of Karen. Karen can't stand to see a black woman enjoying the same benefits of life and of society that she does. There is still a resentment against the successful black people, and that is why we have so much of wide disparity in our health outcomes. My time is about done on this particular broadcast, but I encourage you to look at the 200-page Tulsa Race Riot report. It's online. You can download all 200 pages. If you don't want to read all 200 pages, you can just get the synopsis, get the précis, get the summation. Get yourself acquainted with that. And when you look at that, then think about all those white folks you saw up on top of that Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And just look at, say, yes, they will do it. They have done it before. And you can apply your mind to see what happens when white folks riot. When they riot, and notice that they had the complicity of many in law enforcement, complicity of many that were in the military. They're always sympathizers with this white supremacist fringe. As I wrap up, get ready to go, continue to pray for Mother Fletcher, Mother Randall, and her brother Hughes Van Ellis, Brother Red as they call him. Continue to pray for them that they may get their reparations before they pass on. After all, they're 107, 106, and 100 years old. How long you got to live before some people will do right? As I always say, keep prayer, be prayerful, do the right thing. Let's try to get past this pandemic, this plague, because there are so many other things that we have to contend ourselves with. To my brothers and sisters that are working on these thankless jobs where they want to pay you less than the minimum wage and they don't want to give you no solid hours, no dependable hours. They don't want to let you work full time because they can exploit you by working you part time. I tell you now, as I always say when I get ready to go on, don't stay there. Don't stay there. While you're young, get to stepping. Shake the dust off your feet. Tell those people to take the job and shove it. If they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. We out of here, Doc. Thank you now.